Who's your commander?
Good luck.
Equip.
Move to combat.
Resolves.
Now, before you attack
Does
me,
anyone have an answer?
well played.
Good game.
Hello everyone, DJ here, and you're watching the Jumbo Commander YouTube channel. I have an awesome deck tech with a commander that might not be on your radar. It's the Haunt of Hightower. The Haunt of Hightower came out of Ravnica Allegiance, but it was technically the box topper, so you can't find it in packs. It's only in foil, and at this point in time, you probably have to buy it off of tcgplayer.com. Who's the sponsor of the Jumbo Commander YouTube channel? Anyways, let's get into the deck. The Haunt of Hightower is 4 black for a 3/3 legendary vampire with flying and lifelink. Whenever the Haunt of Hightower attacks, defending player discards a card. Whenever a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, put a +1/+1 counter on the Haunt of Hightower. Okay, so the first thing I want to do when breaking down this deck is breaking down the commander. That body for that mana cost is underwhelming. 6 mana 3/3 lifelinking flyer, blah. But the discard ability on it is quite powerful. It immediately attacks and boom, your opponent discards a card. And then at that point in time, you have a 6 mana flying lifelink 4/4, which is also mediocre. But that discard on a commander is pretty good because you can aim it at a particular player, even if you have to send your commander into combat to get that card out of that hand. And it's repeatable, so if you can keep getting attacks off, then you can keep threatening your opponent's hand. But also, if we lean into the discard theme in this deck, we can have other sources of discard that then automatically grow our commander, or other payoffs that then are enabled by our commander. Pretty good. But what actually seems better than discard, because discard is limited to hand size, is mill. I mean, we're playing 100 card decks, and if we can mill 10 cards off of our opponent's library, then our Haunt of Hightower gets 10 +1/+1 counters. And if we have effects that mill a couple cards off of everyone's library, then we're getting tons of +1/+1 counters. Yeah, mill seems to be the right way to get a lot of counters on your commander. It's a shame because a lot of the most powerful mill effects are in blue, but there are a few in black and we'll talk about them. You know, making our commander so big and beefy makes me think that this could be a Voltron strategy. We play some discard. I mean, we're not going all in on mill, are we? And then essentially we have a Voltron commander that's a little bit slower than everyone else. I don't know, I feel like that's a really narrow strategy. It feels like other commanders can do it in many more colors that give us more tools, and so I feel like we might need to go in another direction if we want to make this a really resilient deck. And that's why I think we look at the discard, we look at the mill, and then we put in a Reanimator package as well. That way we have the Haunt of the Hightower as a Voltron threat, a discarding awesome creature. And then we have Reanimator to kind of take advantage of all that discard and take advantage of that mill. I mean, that does give us another level of attack for our opponents. But one thing that we're talking about here is that we are talking about a deck with a Voltron commander that starts at 6 mana. The power level of this commander is not top tier, and we have to go in knowing that. But it's certainly a unique commander that can smash people out of nowhere. So let's talk about the leader of this deck. Let's talk about the commander focus. What does Haunt of Hightower really add to this deck? Well, if it's going to be a Voltron deck, if it's going to promote discard, if we're going to enable its +1/+1 growth, then we got to get this commander out onto the battlefield. And at 6 mana, we're going to want to make sure to have a lot of ramp. And if we don't have ramp, well then maybe we want to cheat our commander out. How about Geode Golem? I have not seen this played yet. It came out in the most recent commander set and there was a lot of hype about it, and then I never saw it played. And I think that this might be a good spot for it because Haunt of Hightower can be prohibitively expensive. And if Geode Golem can reduce the casting cost by 6, then that's a huge benefit. Another easy include that can get your commander onto the battlefield is Command Beacon. This is a land that when you sacrifice it, you can put your commander from your command zone into your hand. And once you cast it from your hand, you don't have to worry about that pesky commander tax. And let's be honest, with a Voltron commander and one that's threatening to hit your opponent's hand with discard, there could be a target on this vampire. And so any way to get it out again and get your engine going and start threatening people could be really good. Here's the problem with these two cards. Geode Golem is a slam dunk. Throw it in there, see how it works. I think it'll be fun. But Command Beacon is like a $25 card right now. That's a crazy price tag, and it doesn't make sense to make sort of a fun deck that has a little bit of a janky win, that might not be as high a power level when it comes to discard, and then casually throw in a $25 card. I mean, for a lot of people, that makes them less excited about the deck. So don't worry about Command Beacon. Instead, we'll add a few more pieces of solid ramp so that we can always cast our commander, and we're not going to worry about $25 cards in this deck. I've kept the budget reasonable to the power level that I'm expected, which is tuned, fun, smashy. Okay, I want to talk about two cards that control your opponent's boards without impacting your own commander. Archfiend of Depravity is a 5-mana 5/4 flying demon, and at the beginning of each opponent's end step, that player chooses up to 2 creatures he or she controls, then sacrifices the rest. I'm also surprised that this doesn't see a lot of play. A lot of decks are designed to go wide, and then you have a 5-mana 5/4 flyer that trims your opponent's board to their 2 best creatures. That seems really, really good. And again, don't see it played very often. It's also super budget, which is really cool. And then also imagine this. You play the Archfiend of Depravity, and then suddenly, as you're going around the table, everyone's sacrificing their creatures. Not only does that clear room for you to attack with your commander, every creature that goes from the battlefield to the graveyard grows your commander even more. It's very, very good. And then we have a card like Overwhelming Forces. Again, this is another example of a board wipe that might cost a little bit more than you would think a normal board wipe would cost, especially an 8-mana sorcery board wipe. But this is a fun one. Destroy all creatures target opponent controls. In a multiplayer game, you're just like, yeah, suck it, you. And then you just wipe one person's board and then draw a card for each creature destroyed this way. So you just hose one person at the table and you go up a huge amount of card advantage, and then that clears the way for a monstrous commander to just smash them out of the game. It's wonderful. And then of course there's other ways to grow your commander while clearing the board, and those could be like edict effects. Edict effects are very good because they hit all of your opponents. So a card like Plague Crafter, for example. It enters the battlefield and then everyone has to sacrifice something. And Haunt of Hightower will grow with every opponent's sacrificed creature. And that's really, really good. I mean, you have a way to get things off the board and also a way to grow your commander. We can take that up a notch with a card like Torment of Hailfire, where people are sacrificing and discarding all sorts of things, just all over the place, or else they're dead. Torment of Hailfire is just amazing. So when we're playing a deck that has a commander focus, we want to make sure to ramp to be able to get our 6-mana commander out, find ways to keep getting him out after he gets destroyed over and over again, find ways to grow him by controlling our opponent's creatures, and also, we're going to want to play up that discard synergy that we have on our commander. Urgaros, the Empty One, is another big fatty legendary creature. It's a 6-mana flyer, but you can deal some damage and make people discard cards at random. I love random discard a lot. There's also some other powerful discard effects. I like Banshee of the Dread Choir. This does not see enough play. It's a 5-mana 4/4, but this myriad ability is amazing in our format. Basically, whenever you attack with this creature, it creates a token attacking each of your other opponents. So in multiplayer, this thing just goes and breaks up, threatening to hit everyone. And you don't want to be hit by this, because when it does hit you, that player discards a card. Dream Stealer is very fun because it has Menace. It can get in pretty easily, but if this ever dies, you can eternalize it, making it a 4/4. And this has amazing text. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, that player discards that many cards. So as a 4/4, this has your opponents discarding 4 cards. And remember, there will be some Voltron support in this deck, and so Dream Stealer can be easily suited up to deal a lot of damage. Let's keep going with some more discard. Herald of Anguish. There are not a lot of artifacts to improvise this demon out, but once it's out, it's so powerful because it says at the beginning of your end step, each opponent discards a card. Mind Slicer is a crazy rattlesnake. Whenever it's put into a graveyard from play, each player discards his or her hand. Now you would think you'd be at a huge disadvantage when you're discarding your hand too, but you have a lot of card advantage in this deck. In fact, we've built it that way, so discarding your hand when everyone has to discard your hand is not that big of a deal. In fact, maybe that's one reason to play a new card, Awaken the Erstwhile. It's a card I never thought I would play, but just imagine, you play a 5-mana sorcery and suddenly you gift people a bunch of zombies, sure, but you could grow your Haunt of Hightower to be one-shottable. You play a spell and suddenly no one can answer your general and it's gigantic? That is a game-winning position. So good. A few more pieces of discard. Let's talk about the classic that is Siphon Mind. 3 and a black for a sorcery. Each other player discards a card and you draw a card for each card discarded this way. This is amazing in Commander because each opponent, 3 opponents, discards 1 card and you draw 3 cards. Yeah, that's very, 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 very good. Arterial Flow is 3 CMC, and each opponent discards 2 cards, so it's like a Mind Rot. That's not usually an effect we care a lot about. But then if you control a vampire, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Okay, I like that too. Maybe that pushes it over the edge a little bit because remember, your Haunt of the Hightower is a vampire. This is not some slam dunk card, but it's definitely fun synergy for this deck. I love the card advantage we can generate from a simple uncommon artifact called Geth's Grimoire. 4 mana for an artifact that reads, whenever an opponent discards a card from his or her hand, you may draw a card. So just think about all of these different discard effects. We have banshees and creatures attacking opponents. We have effects that have everyone discard their whole hand. We have siphon minds and mind rots and arterial flows and all that crazy stuff. And then every time that happens, you're just drawing more and more cards. I mean, siphon mind was already good. Just imagine if you draw even more cards. Yeah, this makes discard themes crazy good. And then of course you can combine this with Words of Waste to go crazy. Words of Waste is a 3-mana enchantment and you can pay 1 anytime you would draw a card, you just don't, and instead each opponent discards a card from their hand instead. So if you find that you have plenty of cards, you have things to do, then you could just give up your draw step to hose everyone else. It's actually a really powerful decision point, especially in multiplayer, when you can deny them their resources as well. Now, one thing we want to talk about when it comes to discard is some of the discard payoffs. The classic discard payoffs are things like Megrim, Liliana's Caress, the new Raider's Wake. All of them say if an opponent discards a card, they lose 2 life. Fine, great. You know, if we're going all in on discard, that's going to be really, really good. I don't know if we're going to go all in on discard. I think we're going to be a little bit more balanced. We're going to have some discard, we're going to have some mill, we're going to have some reanimator, it's going to be a little bit of Voltron, and we're going to try and make sure that this deck is well-rounded. Because if we go all in on discard, I mean, then maybe we should be playing a Nekusar deck. That's something you have to ask yourself, like, why am I not playing a different commander? So I think that the flexibility and the different ways of winning and the different methods of attacking make this commander unique. So I'm not going to go all in on discard and include these effects. But I am going to include Fel Spectre, because it's a cool specter. Fel Spectre has an impact as soon as it hits the battlefield, allowing you to target an opponent to discard a card. And then whenever any opponent discards a card, that player loses 2 life. So it has that Megrim, Liliana's Caress, Raider's Wake text built into the creature. It does mean that it's a little bit more vulnerable than an enchantment. It definitely doesn't come down as early, so there are definite downsides to this Fel Spectre over some of the other creatures. The plus side of this being on a creature is you can use some of your own reanimation effects to get Fel Spectre back and then chain together some awesome synergies to be able to drain an opponent out. Sangromancer, a 4-mana 3/3 flyer. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you may gain 3 life. Whenever an opponent discards a card, you may gain 3 life. Sangromancer sometimes gives you some incidental life gain that doesn't really matter. And other times, you find yourself with so much life, you are untouchable. Let's talk about a few enchantments that I am going to include just because of their power level. Waste Not. An amazing enchantment, and whenever opponents discard cards, you can generate zombies, mana, or card draw. Yeah, that's so good. And Bloodchief Ascension. This has very similar text as Haunt of Hightower. Basically, there's some conditions you have to meet. You have to lose some life, whatever. So eventually when this gets online, it says whenever a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, that opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So everything we have that synergizes with your commander also synergizes with Bloodchief Ascension. Mill becomes insane because it's just so easy to kill someone if you're just putting cards into the graveyard. Your discard starts draining people. Heck, your control spells like your board wipes start wiping your opponent's life total out as well. We run into a similar problem with these cards as we do Command Beacon, because they're a little bit expensive compared to a lot of other cards in this deck. And this might be one area where you want to break the budget a little bit because they synergize so well and it's so fun to Bloodchief Ascension people. All right, so now that I've talked about how great Haunt of Hightower, Bloodchief Ascension is with Mill, let's talk about that. Because if we can just get a handful of cards into the graveyard, then suddenly that can grow our commander by leaps and bounds. Dread Summons. X black. Each player puts the top X cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. For each creature card put into a graveyard this way, create a tapped 2/2 black zombie creature token. This is already good in multiplayer because it hits everyone. So in a 4-player game, if you cast this where X is 6, then essentially you have each of your opponents milling 6 cards each. That means that for each of your opponents, Haunt of Hightower will get 6 +1/+1 counters, making it coincidentally a 21/21 before it even attacks. Yeah, you can one-shot anyone, and that is not a huge demand on a spell like this. Not to mention the amount of zombies you have to be able to stabilize or finish out different opponents. Shared Trauma is even better. You pay 1 black mana and then you start paying additional mana to just start milling everyone. And some of your meaner opponents could start pouring their own mana in to traumatize other players. Yeah, this can get your commander so big. Not to mention Bloodchief Ascension if it's online. Crazy ways to finish out a game. We also want some removal because remember, if anything ever goes to the graveyard, your haunt gets bigger. And so Grisly Spectacle is a solid piece of removal. Just at 4 CMC, but hang on, wait. You can destroy target non-artifact creature, but its controller puts a number of cards equal to that creature's power from the top of his or her library into his or her graveyard, so it's a little bit of mill. And you think, whatever, sure. But if you take out a big creature, then suddenly that creature's going to the graveyard and they mill maybe like 8 or 10 cards, and then your Haunt of Hightower becomes insanely large. This can take out a blocker and then grow your commander to be big enough to kill. Just like you want removal to control the board and get things out of your commander's way, you also might want some equipment to Voltron up your dude. Sword of Body and Mind. It's just a solid sword, right? +2/+2, pro green and blue. Make a wolf, but also put the top 10 cards of their library into their graveyard. So this grows your commander by +10/+10 once it connects, and then makes the next time you attacked surely deadly. And then we have some repeatable mill with Sewer Nemesis. Sewer Nemesis comes into play and you choose a player, and then really whenever that player casts a spell, they put the top card of their library into their graveyard. Great, just keep milling over and over again. Not only does Sewer Nemesis get bigger, but your commander gets bigger too. I'm actually kind of think that this is really fun in multiplayer because I have opponents that are just like, sure, I'll grow your Sewer Nemesis and your commander, when really you're swinging at everyone else. It's great. And then finally, these last few cards are not technically mill, but they do put a massive amount of cards into graveyards. Dark Deal is a 3-mana effect where each player discards all the cards in their hand, then draws that many -1. And it's that effect where everyone just pitches their hand that really grows your haunt. Same thing with Gaia Reach Sanitarium. It has everyone loot. That's only good sometimes because giving everyone the opportunity to loot when you're only paying for it isn't great, but when you're also growing your commander substantially, then that can be really good too. So we've talked about so many effects that put cards in graveyards, like so many of them, and sometimes that can put us at a disadvantage. And so we want to make sure to use graveyards Not only our own, but our opponents as well. That's why we're milling them. That's why we're discarding them. It's another form of attack that's separate from our commander. Geth, Lord of the Vault, is awesome. It's a 6 mana 5/5, and then basically it allows you to mill and then also put creatures or artifacts, which is very cool. You can just grab a soul ring out of someone's graveyard. You can rob it from their graveyard and put it onto your side of the battlefield, and then you just keep milling them and stealing stuff. It's really awesome. Not to mention, it's also like a huge zombie body with Intimidate, just a really good card. The Eldest Reborn is an Edict effect, it's a discard effect, and it's a Reanimation effect to just get in my deck right now. And then let's talk about some Reanimation. Animate Dead and Necromancy are enchantments that pull creatures from graveyards, and it hits your opponent's graveyard, which is really good. And then we have some spells that do it. Beacon of Unrest is 5 mana. I know, right? But this is Commander. You can get pretty big creatures out of your opponent's graveyards for only 5 mana. And then Reanimate is, again, more expensive than some of these other cards, but you only pay 1 mana to get something huge. You can totally cheat things into play. I also like the big splashy creatures. Demon of Dark Schemes comes down and could wipe the board, growing your commander, and also get cool things back. The problem is that there isn't a lot of energy synergy in here, so you might have to jump through a few hoops to finally get something back you really like. Puppeteer Clique is great because it can target your opponent's graveyards, and your opponent's decks are going to have really good stuff in it, especially if you're milling them a bunch. So steal their creature, smash them with it, win the game. And Sepulchral Primordial is a classic. It's so good in multiplayer, allowing you to pull creatures from each opponent's graveyard. Just a super powerful effect. And then finally, we have Whip of Erebos to give you a little bit more life gain, but also get stuff back from your own graveyard. Just imagine whipping back a Sepulchral Primordial or a Geth or something like that. So good. The card that I want to whip back though is Phyrexian Delver, because it's a reanimate on a creature. Again, 5 CMC to get something back doesn't let you really cheat mana costs and get something big out really fast, but this is Commander, we can be slow. And so that's the different ways to win the game. You know, you can reanimate something big and play the reanimation game. You can sort of slowly choke your opponents out through discard. You can get your commander huge, like really huge, really fast, and then Voltron someone out, commander damage someone to death. Or to be honest, you could probably just Torment of Hailfire. That just wins games, right? Okay, I hope you enjoyed this video. I know that I am enjoyed this deck. You might tell recently that I really enjoy decks that have a lot of different ways of attacking. They feel very well-rounded, and I really like the way this deck came together. And so if you want to see exactly how I put it together, check out the link in the description. That'll take you to tcgplayer.com, where you can see my deck list. And if you're ever buying cards from tcgplayer.com, click on my link in the description, because then it helps me out, because then they know that you listen to Jumbo Commander. So thank you for supporting me by supporting tcgplayer.com. And then also, I have to send a heartfelt thank you to my patrons who literally support me all the time, constantly, and make Jumbo Commander possible. Thank you, all my patrons. And thank you for listening to this. Sorry it was a little bit late this week, but I'm going to be back on track producing more and more content. And I hope to see you guys all in the comments on Twitter. I just hope to see you guys everywhere. All right, everyone. Bye.